Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Premier Danielle Smith of the province of Alberta. Premier, I mentioned just before the break, relations, generally, I know we've been talking about Bill C-69, but generally with the federal government have been at a fairly low ebb. What do you think needs to change, in your opinion, to get the federal government and the province of Alberta more in sync about the issues that Canadians and Albertans care about?
I think we've demonstrated that we're coming to the table in a spirit of cooperation. I've mentioned that we're in sync and want to get in sync on a carbon neutral target by 2050. We've done an emissions reduction plan. We've done the work on figuring out what the milestones should be. We have a working group that's meeting in Ottawa this week to talk about how we can align our targets. I've also worked with them collaboratively before on the forest fires, on the health accord that we signed. So it's when they come to the table in a spirit of genuine collaboration, where they want to work with us on our priorities and be a funding partner, we have a great relationship. Where we have a bad relationship is when Minister Stephen Guilbeault acts like the Constitution doesn't matter, acts like he has got carte blanche power to just announce things that are going to be incredibly damaging to our economy, interfere with our right to develop our electricity grid, which is our constitutional right to do so, and to interfere with our right to develop our natural resources, which is our constitutional right to do so. So I would say we could get along great as long as they stay in their lane and come to us at the table in a spirit of cooperation.
And it should be said, Premier, that you've obviously been collaborating with other provincial premiers. You're kind of in line with their thinking as well, I presume.
One of the great pleasures is the Council of the Federation. And part of what I've been so impressed by is everybody puts their partisan differences aside. They come to the table and we talk about the things that we can agree on. And part of what we're asking the federal government to do is to work with us on strategic infrastructure. I mean, we saw, for instance, with the port strike in Western Canada, that we need to build out our port infrastructure. The Vancouver port is one of the lowest performing in the world. It needs to do better. We need to develop other ports out, including ones that will give access to the Yukon and Northwest Territories on being able to get their products to market, including critical minerals. And the federal government has an important role to play on that. I'm not quite sure why it is they keep on wanting to meddle in provincial affairs rather than stick to their own business. They've got big issues that they need to solve.
Right.
And so we're trying to put things back on them to do exactly that. So whether it's working with British Columbia on making sure that we're expanding LNG export and getting credit for it internationally as we reduce emissions, whether it's working with Saskatchewan and Manitoba on a corridor to the Hudson Bay so that we can hopefully build pipelines, but also build transmission lines so that we'd be able to decarbonize our industries with some Manitoba power, or whether it's working with Ontario and Quebec on continuing to provide opportunities for manufacturing. I think that there is a huge amount of common cause that we have with our fellow provinces, and we're hoping to continue to work together to make sure that the federal government partners with us as opposed to dictates to us.
Another issue that's on the front burner is Alberta's activism in the Canada Pension Plan. Uh, I would have to say a lot. I'm obviously in Ontario, but I'm maybe it's wider than that. A lot of people don't understand what's going on there. Can you state what your goals are there and how you're trying to implement those?
One of the conversations we've had in our province going back to 2001, so it's been an active conversation for over 20 years, is how do we assert ourselves in our areas of constitutional authority? Stephen Harper drafted a firewall letter with a number of professors all the way back in 2001 saying if we want to be more like Quebec, Quebec collects its own taxes. They have their own police force, they manage their own immigration system, and they have their own pension plan. And so when my predecessor did a consultation a few years ago about how we might get a fairer deal for Alberta, that was one of the things Albertans wanted us to look at. So I went through, did a report. The report was done by Morneau Chappelle, which is now LifeMark, and they released it, and it showed that because Albertans over contribute, and because those over contributions have compounded over time, that when you net out what is owed in benefits, we are entitled to $334 billion worth of the assets. And if we were to have our own pension plan, that would allow us to reduce premiums. It would also allow us to increase payments to our seniors. And it is a constitutional authority, pensions that fall under provincial jurisdiction. So we're having that conversation to keep a promise, I believe, to what Albertans asked us to do. And we'll do in the process of having a panel go through and see whether or not the people want to put it to a referendum. And if they tell us they do, then there'll be a vote on it and we'll do what Albertans decide.
20 seconds before the break. So the next stage would be a referendum then?
If the Albertans decide that they want us to do that, that would be the direction we would go. Our tagline in all of our advertising has been "Your pension, your choice." We believe that this is a decision of the people to make, and they just needed to have the full information. Now they've got it, so we'll see what they tell us in the coming months.
Premier, we're just going to take another short break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.